The Callahan mansion rose from Beacon Hill like a fist of old money wrapped in wrought iron and silence. 40 rooms of cold marble and colder secrets, gates that hadn't opened for strangers in 4 years, and somewhere on the third floor, a 7-year-old girl who hadn't heard her own name spoken aloud since the night she watched her mother die. Elena Vasquez sat in her rusted Honda at those gates, engine idling, watching her breath fog the windshield while she read the text message one more time. Dana-Farber Cancer Institute. Trial registration closes in 29 days. Required deposit, $25,000. Full treatment cost, $85,000. Please confirm enrollment. She turned off the engine. The silence rushed in like water filling a sinking ship. 29 days, that's all her mother had. 29 days to find $85,000 or the experimental treatment that represented Rosa Vasquez's only chance at survival would go to someone else. Someone whose daughter had money. Someone whose daughter hadn't spent the last 12 years working double shifts at understaffed hospitals, sending every spare dollar to a woman who still insisted she was fine, who still said, "Meja, you don't have to do this," who still pretended the cancer wasn't eating her from the inside out. The gates buzzed. Elena drove through. She watched in her rearview mirror as they closed behind her, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she just swallowed something that wouldn't let her back out. The woman who met her at the service entrance had a face carved from the same gray stone as the mansion. Mrs. O'Sullivan, head of household staff. Her handshake was brief and dry, her eyes the color of dishwater, and her voice carried the particular flatness of someone who had learned long ago that caring about things only made them hurt more when they were taken away. The tour was short. East Wing, medical supply room, the grandfather's quarters. Patrick Callahan was 81 years old and had forgotten most of them. He sat in a leather chair by a window that overlooked a garden he no longer recognized, and when Elena entered the room, he looked up with a stranger's polite confusion. "Margaret," he said, "is that you?" "No, Mr. Callahan, I'm Elena, I'm your new night nurse." He nodded slowly, accepting this information the way he accepted everything now, without resistance, without understanding, without any of the sharp intelligence that had once built a shipping empire from nothing. His eyes drifted back to the window. Mrs. O'Sullivan pulled Elena into the hallway. "He has good days and bad days. Tonight will likely be a bad one. The storms make him restless." She paused. "He calls everyone Margaret. That was his daughter-in-law. She died 4 years ago." Elena nodded. She'd seen this before. The way dementia grabbed hold of a single memory and wouldn't let go, replaying it on a loop while everything else faded to static. "The position pays $3,000 per week," Mrs. O'Sullivan continued. 30-day minimum contract. You will be paid in full upon completion. If you leave early, you forfeit everything. $3,000 a week, $12,000 a month. In 30 days, she'd have enough for the trial and then some. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. "I understand. I doubt that." Mrs. O'Sullivan stopped at the base of a staircase. Above them, the mansion climbed upward into darkness. Second floor. Third floor, something about the stillness up there made Elena think of tombs. "Before you begin, you need to understand the rules." She held up one finger. "Rule 1, you work the east wing only, you do not wander. This house has rooms that haven't been opened in years, and Mr. Callahan prefers it that way." A second finger. "Rule 2, if you see Mr. Callahan, the son, not the father, you do not speak unless spoken to. You do not make eye contact unless he initiates it. You are furniture to him, expensive furniture that serves a function. Remember that." A third finger. "Rule 3, the third floor is the family residence. You do not go there, not to clean, not to explore, not for any reason, ever." Mrs. Sullivan paused. Something shifted in her face. The carefully maintained blankness cracked just for a moment, and Elena saw something underneath that looked almost like fear. "Rule 4, her voice dropped. There is a child in this house, a girl. 7 years old. She lives on the third floor. She does not speak. She does not respond to sound. She has not heard her own voice in 4 years. Elena waited. "The child is not your concern. If you see her, you look away. If she approaches you, you walk away. If she touches you, you do not respond, you do not speak to her, you do not smile at her, you do not acknowledge her existence in any way. To you, she is a ghost. Do you understand? Elena hesitated. Why? Mrs. O'Sullivan's expression hardened. Because Mr. Callahan has spent 4 years and $11 million trying to fix what cannot be fixed. Because every specialist, every treatment, every experimental procedure has failed. Because he has watched hope destroy him twice, once when his wife died, and once for every doctor who promised they could help his daughter and couldn't. She leaned closer, close enough that Elena could smell the lavender soap on her skin. The nurse before you sang a lullaby. She thought the child was sleeping nearby and she sang. She was removed from the house that night. She works at a gas station now. No hospital in Massachusetts will give her a reference. Elena's mouth went dry. The one before her had ideas, theories about what was wrong with the child. She shared those theories with Mr. Callahan. She thought she was helping. Mrs. O'Sullivan's voice dropped to barely a whisper. I don't know where she is now. No one does. Staircase seemed to stretch upward forever. Elena imagined a small girl sitting alone in one of those dark rooms, surrounded by silence so complete it had become a kind of prison. Mr. Callahan's pain is not something you can fix, Mrs. O'Sullivan said. His daughter's condition is not something you can help. The only thing you can do is your job, quietly, competently, and without involving yourself in matters that do not concern you. Do this for 30 days, collect your payment, and leave. She straightened. The mask slid back into place. Do you understand the rules? Elena thought about her mother. 29 days, $85,000. A cancer that was spreading while she stood here in this cold hallway, debating the ethics of looking away from a child who needed help. Yes, she said, I understand. That night, Elena settled into the routine, checking vitals, adjusting medication. Sitting with the old man while he slept, watching his chest rise and fall, listening to him murmur names she didn't recognize. At 2 in the morning, she heard something, footsteps, small and shuffling, coming from somewhere above her. Elena stood at the window and looked up at the 3rd floor. Most of the windows were dark, but one, a corner room overlooking the garden, had a faint glow. A nightlight maybe, or a lamp left burning against the darkness. She watched for a long time. And just before she turned away, she saw a shadow pass in front of that light. Small, quick, gone almost before she registered it. A ghost, Mrs. O'Sullivan had called her. To you, she is a ghost. Elena returned to her chair. She picked up her book. She did not look at the window again, but she couldn't stop thinking about the shadow. Couldn't stop imagining a 7-year-old girl wandering alone through an empty floor, trapped in a silence that had lasted 4 years. 29 days, she told herself. Just follow the rules, don't look, don't engage, don't think about the girl who isn't your problem. She managed to believe it for almost 3 days. On the 3rd morning, Elena finished her shift and walked through the garden toward her car. The sun was just coming up, painting everything in shades of pink and gold, and the air smelled like dew and roses and the particular stillness that exists only in the moments before the world wakes up. She almost didn't see the girl. Sophia Callahan was sitting on a stone bench near the garden wall, her back to Elena, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She wasn't moving, wasn't playing, just sitting there still as a statue, facing a hedge that had been trimmed to look like a rabbit. Elena stopped. Every instinct told her to turn around, walk away, pretend she hadn't seen anything. But then Sophia raised her hand to her ear. Not the absent gesture of someone scratching an itch. Something deliberate, intentional. She pressed her palm flat against her right ear, held it there for 3 seconds, released, pressed again, released, pressed again, like she was testing something, searching for something, like she was waiting for a sound that wouldn't come. Elena watched for 10 seconds, 20, 30. She knew what that gesture meant. She'd seen it before, years ago, in nursing school. An 82-year-old man named Marcus, who everyone thought had dementia. He'd responded to questions randomly, seemed lost in his own world, couldn't follow conversations. Elena had been assigned to clean him up one morning. She'd looked in his ear on a whim, and what she'd found had changed everything. A wax plug the size of a pencil eraser, pressed directly against his eardrum. She'd removed it. 20 minutes later, Marcus's dementia had disappeared. He'd never been confused. He'd just been unable to hear clearly, and the distortion had made everything sound like nonsense. The attending physician had never once looked in his ears. Elena watched Sophia press her palm against her ear again. Press, release, press, release. That's not how a deaf person moves, she thought. That's how someone moves when they're trying to find something, when they remember what sound felt like and they're searching for it in the darkness. She should walk away. She should go to her car and drive to her apartment and sleep, and come back tonight and do her job and collect her money and save her mother. That's what a smart person would do. Elena stood in that garden for almost a minute, watching a 7-year-old girl search for sounds that wouldn't come. And then she did something she would never be able to explain to herself, something that made no logical sense, something that would set into motion a chain of events that would either save her or destroy her. She watched for one more second, and then she turned and walked away, but not toward her car, toward the east wing, where she'd seen a toy rabbit sitting on a hallway table the night before, a rabbit that looked very much like the hedge Sophia had been staring at, a rabbit that had clearly been dropped by a small girl who wasn't allowed to leave the 3rd floor, a rabbit that Elena knew with absolute certainty she was about to return. The rules said look away. The rules said walk away. The rules said the girl was a ghost, but Elena had spent 16 years living with the memory of her father dying in her arms while she froze instead of calling for help, and she was done being the kind of person who looked away. The stuffed rabbit weighed almost nothing in Elena's hands, but it felt like carrying a bomb up the forbidden staircase. She climbed past the 2nd floor landing, past the portrait of Margaret Callahan with her sad eyes and her baby daughter, past the point where any excuse would save her. The 3rd floor hallway stretched ahead of her, dark wood, closed doors, and a silence so complete it seemed to have texture. She placed the rabbit outside Sophia's door. She knocked once. She walked away without looking back. For 3 days, nothing happened. Elena convinced herself she'd imagined the whole thing, the girl in the garden, the ear-pressing gesture, the pull she felt toward a child who wasn't her concern. She did her job. She checked the grandfather's vitals. She counted the days until she could save her mother. On the 4th day, she found the drawing under her door, a crayon rabbit, purple and lopsided and beautiful, and beside it, a figure with dark hair holding the rabbit's paw. At the bottom, in careful letters that must have taken forever to form, "Thank you." Elena stood in her room for a long time, holding that piece of paper. The rules said throw it away. The rules said forget you ever saw it. She put it under her pillow instead. The next morning, she folded a piece of paper into an origami crane and left it at the base of the 3rd floor stairs. The morning after that, a new drawing appeared, 2 birds sitting on a branch, wing to wing. The exchange became a ritual. Elena would leave something small, a pressed flower from the garden, a note identifying it as a lily, and Sophia would respond with drawings that grew more complex each day. A garden with 2 figures walking together, the word lily written in careful capitals, a moon with a face that looked suspiciously like Elena's. On day 17, Sophia drew something different, an ear with a question mark inside it. Elena stared at that drawing for over an hour, sitting on her bed while the grandfather slept and the mansion creaked around her. An ear, a question mark. Sophia was trying to tell her something, asking a question no one else had thought to ask. The memory surfaced without warning. Marcus Chen, 82 years old, sitting in a wheelchair at Boston General during Elena's nursing school rotation. Everyone said he had dementia. He couldn't follow conversations. He responded to questions with random answers. He seemed lost in a world no one else could reach. Elena had been assigned to clean him up one morning. Standard procedure, nothing special, but something about the way he tilted his head made her pause. She'd looked in his ear on impulse, just a quick check with her penlight. What she found made her call for a supervisor immediately. A wax plug the size of a pencil eraser pressed directly against his eardrum. The removal took 20 minutes. Marcus's dementia disappeared in 30. He'd never been confused. He'd been unable to hear clearly, and the distortion made every voice sound like nonsense. He'd spent 8 months in a care facility being treated for a condition he didn't have, all because no one had thought to look in his ears. The attending physician had never once checked. Elena looked at Sophia's drawing again. The ear, the question mark. What if everyone had been so focused on complicated answers that they missed something simple? The thought consumed her for 3 days. She went through her shifts on autopilot, checking vitals and adjusting medications while her mind circled the same impossible question. 47 doctors, 12 countries, $11 million, and a 7-year-old girl who touched her ear like she was searching for something that had been stolen. On day 19, Mrs. O'Sullivan almost ended everything. Elena was in her room, changing out of her scrubs, when the door opened without a knock. Mrs. O'Sullivan stepped inside, clipboard in hand, eyes moving across the space with the efficiency of someone who had conducted 1,000 inspections. Elena's blood turned to ice. The corner of Sophia's drawing, the one with 2 birds, was sticking out from under her pillow. Mrs. O'Sullivan walked to the bed. Her hand hovered over the pillow. Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't do anything but watch her entire future collapse in slow motion. Mrs. O'Sullivan picked up the drawing. She looked at the 2 birds for a long moment. Then she looked at Elena. The silence stretched like a wire about to snap. "You've been here 3 weeks," Mrs. O'Sullivan said. "You've done good work. The grandfather is comfortable. His vitals have been stable." She placed the drawing back exactly where it had been. "Don't make me regret recommending you." She left without another word. Elena didn't move for 10 minutes. When she finally exhaled, her entire body was shaking. That night she made her choice. The grandfather was sleeping soundly when Elena slipped out of the east wing and made her way to Dominic's study. The door was unlocked, a small miracle she didn't have time to question. Inside, she found a filing cabinet marked Medical, Sophia, and her hands were steady as she photographed every page. She reviewed the files in her room, page by page, scan by scan. 47 specialist reports all saying the same thing: auditory nerve damage, permanent, untreatable. But on the original CT scan from 4 years ago, something caught her eye. A dark mass in the ear canal, small but distinct. The radiologist's note read, "Artifact, disregard." Elena flipped to the next scan, 6 months later. The dark mass was larger. Note, "Imaging artifact, non-significant." The next scan. And the next, and the next. The same dark mass appeared on every single image for 4 years, growing, expanding, pressing against the eardrum with increasing force. Every single one labeled artifact by the same radiologist, Dr. William Ashford III, the man who had been collecting $50,000 a month in monitoring fees for 48 months, $2.4 million to treat a condition that didn't exist. Elena's hands were trembling when Connor found her outside Sophia's door at 2 in the morning on day 22. "You're playing a dangerous game." His voice was quiet, but there was something in it that wasn't quite a warning, something that sounded almost like hope. "Something's wrong with her ear," Elena whispered. "Something everyone missed, or something someone hid." Connor was silent for a long moment. Then, "I have a sister who was born deaf, real deaf. She moves a certain way, like someone who never expected to hear anything. That girl in there," he nodded towards Sophia's door. "She doesn't move like that. She moves like someone waiting to hear something again." He walked away without reporting her. The examination happened the next afternoon. Sophia was alone in the garden, sitting on her usual bench, facing the rabbit-shaped hedge. Elena approached slowly, penlight in hand, heart hammering against her ribs. She knelt beside the girl. She didn't speak. She knew Sophia couldn't hear her. Instead, she held up the penlight and pointed to her own ear, then to Sophia's, raising her eyebrows in a question. Sophia held perfectly still. Elena leaned in and looked. What she saw made her knees give out. She sat down hard on the cold ground, staring at nothing, her entire understanding of the situation collapsing and rebuilding itself in a single moment. It was black, hard, massive. 4 years of impacted cerumen, wax, compressed into a plug the size of a marble, pressed directly against Sophia's eardrum. She wasn't nerve damaged. She was blocked. And every doctor in the world had looked at the scans and called it an artifact. $3 in supplies could fix this. A simple ear curette, some saline solution, 15 minutes of careful work. Any first-year nursing student could do it. $11 million couldn't buy what Alina could do for free. But if she did it, if she performed an unauthorized medical procedure on Dominic Callahan's daughter, she would lose everything. The job, the money, her mother's only chance at survival, and if she didn't do it, Sophia would stay in silence, forever, a prisoner of her own ear canal, surrounded by people who loved her but couldn't see what was right in front of them. Alina lay awake that night, turning it over and over until the thoughts wore grooves in her mind. She thought about Marcus, restored to himself in 30 minutes. She thought about her father, dying in her arms while she froze. She thought about being 12 years old and watching the light leave his eyes because she couldn't make herself move. The storm hit on day 28, where the reports had been warning about the nor'easter all week, the worst in 15 years, they said. Day staff were sent home early. Dominic was called to an emergency meeting downtown. By 8 o'clock, the city was buried under 2 feet of snow. By 10, the power failed. By midnight, the roads were impassable. Alina was alone in the East Wing with the grandfather, and Sophia was alone on the 3rd floor. At 2 in the morning, Alina was checking the grandfather's vitals by flashlight when she heard it. A scream, not just any scream, a sound of pure, primal terror that cut through the silence like a blade. The same sound Sophia must have made the night her mother died. The sound of a child trapped in a nightmare she couldn't hear herself escaping. Alina was at the bottom of the 3rd floor staircase before she realized she'd moved. The rules said, do not go up. The rules said, the child is a ghost to you. But Alina had spent 16 years carrying the weight of not acting when it mattered. She could still feel her father's hand growing cold in hers while she sat frozen, unable to reach for the phone that might have saved him. She would not freeze again. She started climbing. The 3rd floor hallway stretched before Alina like a throat, dark and narrow, lit only by the flashlight in her trembling hand. Lightning split the sky outside the windows. In the flash, she saw Sophia's door at the end of the hall, cracked open, a sliver of darkness beyond. The sobbing had stopped. The silence was worse. Alina pushed the door open. Sophia was curled in the corner of her room, knees drawn to her chest, hands pressed against her ears so hard her knuckles had gone white. She wasn't crying anymore. She was somewhere else entirely, trapped in a memory of screeching tires and shattering glass, of her mother's last breath, and the silence that swallowed everything after. Alina crossed the room and knelt beside her. She didn't speak. She knew Sophia couldn't hear her. Instead, she placed her palm flat against Sophia's chest, over her heart. The gesture from her training, I'm here, you're not alone. Sophia's eyes opened. In the flashlight beam, they were her mother's eyes, terrified, searching, desperate for someone to pull her back from the edge. Alina saw her father's face in that look. The night he collapsed. The night she froze while the seconds bled away and his heart stopped beating in her arms. This time she moved. She pulled out the supplies she'd been hiding for 5 days. The ear curette, the saline solution, the suction bulb, clean cloths, her penlight. She positioned Sophia gently against the wall, tilting her head to expose the right ear. One more look with the penlight. The black mass sat against the eardrum like a tumor made of silence. Removing impacted cerumen is one of the most basic procedures in nursing. First-year students practice it on mannequins. It takes 15 minutes. It costs $3 in supplies. $11 million couldn't buy what Alina was about to do for free. She worked slowly, carefully, saline to soften, curette to loosen, suction to remove. The wax came out in pieces, black, hard, ancient. 4 years of compressed silence, extracted fragment by fragment. Sophia held perfectly still, as if she understood that something important was happening, something that required her absolute trust. The final piece, the core, was the size of a marble. It released with a soft pop. Sophia's eardrum was visible now, pink, intact, perfect. The storm howled outside. Wind rattled the windows hard enough to shake the frame. Sophia went completely still. Her eyes widened. She whispered, the first word she'd spoken in 4 years. Wind. Alina's throat closed. She could barely form the words. Yes, that's the wind. Can you hear it? Sophia started to cry, but differently now, not terror, wonder. Her small hands reached up and touched her own ears like she was meeting them for the first time. "I can hear you," she said. "I can hear your voice. It's so loud. Everything is so loud." She threw her arms around Elena and held on like she was afraid the sound would disappear if she let go. "Thank you," Sophia whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Elena held her and let her own tears fall, for Sophia, for her father, for the 16 years she'd spent carrying the weight of not moving when it mattered. She had moved this time. She had finally moved. The front door crashed open downstairs. Footsteps, running, multiple sets, echoed through the mansion. Then Dominic's voice, cutting through the storm. "Sophia." He took the stairs 3 at a time. Elena heard him coming but couldn't move, couldn't do anything but hold Sophia tighter as the footsteps thundered closer. The door burst open. Dominic Callahan stood in the doorway, chest heaving, snow melting in his dark hair. His eyes found them instantly. His daughter on the floor, a stranger holding her, medical instruments scattered around them, and blood on Sophia's neck. A small scratch from the procedure, nothing serious but enough. He didn't ask questions. He crossed the room in 2 strides, grabbed Elena by the throat and slammed her against the wall. His hand was a vice. His eyes were murder. "What did you do to her?" Elena couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. Black spots danced at the edges of her vision. Then Sophia screamed, "Daddy, stop!" Dominic froze. He turned slowly, like a man afraid of what he might see. Sophia was standing, looking at him, speaking. "I can hear you," she said. "She made me hear again, don't hurt her." Dominic released Elena. She slid down the wall, gasping, hands at her throat. He stood perfectly still, staring at his daughter like she was a ghost made flesh. "What did you say?" "I can hear you, Daddy." Sophia walked toward him, tears streaming down her face. "I can hear the storm. I can hear my own voice. I can hear everything." Something cracked in Dominic's expression, something that had been frozen solid for 4 years. For one moment, Elena saw the man underneath, the father who had lost his wife and watched his daughter disappear into silence, who had spent $11 million trying to buy back what had been stolen. But the moment passed. His face hardened again. He turned to Connor, who stood in the doorway. "Take the nurse to the basement. Lock her in the cold room. I need to understand what happened before I decide what to do with her." Connor hesitated. His eyes met Elena's. "Now," Dominic said. Elena was dragged down 4 flights of stairs. The cold room was exactly what it sounded like. Stone walls, no windows, a single bare bulb that flickered twice and died. The door locked behind her with a sound like a coffin closing. She sat in the darkness, shivering, and thought, "I saved her, I saved the child. And now I'm going to die for it. But at least I didn't freeze. At least I moved." The door opened 3 hours later. Not Connor, Dominic himself, standing in the light like a man who had aged 10 years in a single night. Behind him, Elena could see the hallway. Dr. Ashford being escorted past by 2 men who looked like they knew exactly what to do with people Dominic wanted removed. His face was pale, his hands were shaking. "Mr. Callahan, please," Ashford's voice cracked. The scans were inconclusive, the imaging artifacts. "Take him," Dominic said without turning around. Ashford was dragged away. His protests echoed down the hallway, then faded to nothing. Dominic looked at Elena for a long moment. Then he did something she never expected. He bowed his head. "Dr. Chen examined my daughter. She flew in from Johns Hopkins. I sent the helicopter." His voice was quiet. Controlled. She reviewed the scans, all of them, 4 years of images showing what she called textbook-impacted cerumen, every single one labeled as an artifact by the same radiologist. He paused. $2.4 million. That's what I paid Dr. Ashford over 4 years to treat a condition that didn't exist. A condition he knew didn't exist. Dominic's hands curled into fists. My daughter sat in silence for 4 years while that man collected his fees. "I'm sorry," Elena whispered. "I should have told you what I found. I should have. You should have nothing." Dominic cut her off. "You saw what 47 specialists missed. You risked your life to help a child who wasn't your concern. You broke every rule in this house, and my daughter can hear again because of it." He stepped closer. "I owe you an apology. I've never said that to anyone who wasn't family." His voice caught. "But I owe you more than words can carry." Elena stood in Dominic's study an hour later, Still shaking from the cold room, still processing what had happened, Dominic slid a paper across his desk. You came here for money, for your mother's treatment. You needed $85,000. Yes, Elena managed. This is a wire transfer for $1 million. It will arrive in your account within the hour. Elena couldn't speak. Your mother will receive treatment at Dana-Farber. The best oncologist in the country is being contacted tonight. All expenses covered for as long as needed. Dominic stood and walked to the window, his back to her. When she recovers, and she will recover, you'll bring her here for dinner. You saved my daughter, your family now. 3 months later, Rose's tumor was shrinking. The doctors used words like remarkable response and unexpected remission. Elena visited every day. She brought flowers from the Callahan garden, lilies, always lilies. Mija, Rosa said one afternoon, studying her daughter's face, you look different, lighter. I didn't freeze this time, Mama. Someone needed me and I moved. 6 months later, the mansion was full of sound. Sophia's laughter echoed through hallways that had known only silence. Music played in the kitchen. Dominic came home earlier now, learning sign language with his daughter, not because she needed it, but because they wanted a secret language just for them. Dr. Ashford was in federal prison, healthcare fraud, 22 years. Connor and Elena were together. He'd finally told her about his connection to her family, a promise made to someone she'd lost, a vow to watch over her if he ever got the chance. He'd be proud of you, Connor said. You're exactly who he said you were. 1 year later, Elena ran a clinic funded by Dominic, housed in a building he'd bought specifically for this purpose. The clinic specialized in one thing: misdiagnosed children, the ones the system had given up on, the ones whose parents were told nothing more could be done. 7 families helped so far, 7 children who had been written off, 7 sets of parents who had been told to accept the impossible. Every Sunday, Elena went to the Callahan mansion for dinner. Sophia called her Aunt Elena. Rosa came too, cancer-free now, healthier than she'd been in years. The dining room that used to hold only silence held laughter instead. The final night of this story, Elena tucked Sophia into bed. Aunt Elena, Sophia's voice was sleepy, content. Why did you help me when everyone else didn't? Elena thought for a long moment. Because I saw something in you that no one else was looking for. And because a long time ago, someone I loved needed help, and I was too scared to move. I promised myself I'd never let that happen again. Sophia nodded like this made perfect sense. I'm glad you came to our house. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Elena turned off the light and walked toward the door, but Sophia could hear her footsteps now as she left. She could hear the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of fabric, the soft click of the door closing. She could hear everything. And that was enough. Sometimes the thing that changes everything isn't a miracle. It isn't a $1 million treatment or a world-famous specialist. Sometimes it's just someone who refuses to look away. Someone who breaks the rules because the rules were wrong. Someone who moves when everyone else stays frozen. If this story meant something to you, hit that subscribe button. Share it with someone who needs to hear that ordinary people can do extraordinary things. And remember, the next time someone tells you nothing can be done, maybe look one more time. You might be the one who sees what everyone else missed.